Welcome back to Jurassic World Evolution DLC speculation. So far we've covered the continent of Asia with its root in Jurassic Park, Japan, and we looked at dinosaurs and dig sites from not only Asia but India and Australia as well. Then we proceeded with Jurassic World Europe, where Hammond planned his second Jurassic Park in the Azores in the novel universe. Today we move across the Mediterranean to explore the continents of Africa and the island of Madagascar. Now you might be thinking, what is Jurassic World Africa? Is there any lore or canon reference that Hammond was planning to build a park in or around this continent? Well, no, but there are plenty of references to the continent itself. Hammond's early years were concerned mostly with natural conservation, and he did invest a lot of wealth and effort into many programs that eventually culminated further into more extreme genetic engineering, and many of these began in Africa. Hammond possibly attempted to obtain genetic material from a quagga, a zebra-like African animal that went extinct in the 1880s, perhaps in an attempt to reintroduce it. Furthermore, in the novel, Hammond had cloned a foot-long dwarf elephant with extensive use of his increasing involvement in genetic technology at the time, and used it as a sort of proof of concept for possible investors in the upstart InGen Corporation. In the film, it was mentioned he had set up a wildlife preserve in Kenya, and this is where he came into the acquaintance with Robert Muldoon, one of his park wardens. It's clear Hammond had investments in the area, and his almost absurd levels of wealth would mean buying land in this region was definitely within his means. One of the most lucrative locations in Africa would have been the Zanzibar archipelago off the coast of Kenya and Tanzania, close to the port of Mombasa, interestingly where Roland Tembo was from, and also close to the Tendaguru Formation. However, these islands are not volcanic, which seems to be a feature that InGen prefers heavily, due to having access to geothermal energy, which would mean the island can self-sustain its own power without shipping resources, and a rich fertile soil to increase the probability of replicating Mesozoic plant life. Some of these archipelagos that fit the criteria include the Comoros and Mayotte off the coast of Madagascar and close to the nearby Maverano Formation. Alternatively, further out into the Indian Ocean, there are also the Reunion, Mauritius and Seychelles chains that are possible areas of expansion. Since there is no substantial lore connection for a Jurassic World Africa idea, the location is essentially up in the air. Anyways, let's get into the more important part of the video as we explore the current in-game dig sites and future dig sites that are worthy of addition, as well as the dinosaurs that have a potential shout in a theoretical Jurassic World Africa DLC. The first site we go to was sneaked in our Jurassic World Europe video, and we can finally reveal it as the Kem beds of Morocco. These bedrocks constitute the Cenomanian period, the first age of the late Cretaceous, and thus can also be described as the middle of the Cretaceous. By far the most interesting feature of this site is the immense variety of large theropods, which seems counterintuitive. How could a large number of carnivores coexist in such an environment? It is thus believed that most of the dinosaurs here had key niches and preyed on certain groups of animals in order to avoid competition between one another. Spinosaurus was found here, and it was believed to have been mainly a piscivorous fish eater, leaving land predation to such titans as the Carcharodontosaurus. In every practical sense, this was a devastating creature, as one of the largest carnivores to ever walk the earth. Its combination of a sturdy skull with extremely powerful jaws equipped with serrated shark-like teeth make it well suited to bringing down any sized herbivore, and although smaller than Spinosaurus, would still have been the top land carnivore in North Africa, and due to its fossils being found literally everywhere, it's a testament to the success of the dinosaur. Carcharodontosaurus was featured in Operation Genesis, where it has undoubtedly made its most prolific influence to the community, as well as smaller cameos in some other games like Warpath, but otherwise has not made much impact in the Jurassic Park canon. This was another one of those larger than T-Rex theropods, and thus always garnered a sense of prestige around it, so I hope if added, Frontier should make sure it is larger than the in-game Tyrannosaurus, sitting snugly in third position behind the sizes of Spinosaurus and Giganotosaurus. The Delta Runner was so named because of its lighter build than the usual heavier carnivores we see in North Africa, and this speed and agility would have come in handy to reduce the otherwise strong competition from larger predators such as Carcharodontosaurus. Deltadromeus would have been capable of catching smaller, faster prey such as ornithomimids or ornithopods, as well as possibly scavenging larger carcasses in small-sized packs. You would expect a theropod that fills this niche to be small to medium sized, but at 8 meters in length, Deltadromeus is definitely no pushover and would rival the other medium carnivores in the game. Rebbachisaurus is a unique sauropod in that it featured a tall ridge on its back, and thus the Rebbachisaurids formed a sister family to the more extraordinarily ridged Dicraeosaurs in the Diplodocid superfamily. Rebbachisaur discoveries throughout Africa and South America during the Cenomanian Late Cretaceous fueled the debate that these two continents were still partly connected during this time period, much later than previously believed. Sigilomastosaurus has had a shaky, indeterminate past, considered a dubious Moroccan species of Spinosaurus initially, then even possibly at one point a Carcharodontosaurus species, before recently being assigned as a definite genus in the Spinosaurini tribe this year. Subsequently, the largest specimen of Spinosaurus aegypticus has been reassigned to Sigilomastosaurus, making this particular dinosaur slightly larger than its more famous cousin. Studies of the cervical vertebrae also reveal Sigilomastosaurus could have possibly grown larger than Spinosaurus, but otherwise both animals are very similar to one another. The reason I add this particular species is because it provides an opportunity for a more accurate portrayal of the more scientific Spinosaurus, whilst also allowing the film canon Spinosaurus currently represented in the game to exist as well. The Kemkem Beds is one of the most famous African dinosaur sites, and in recent times has been fairly prolific in important finds that have helped to properly classify and understand such species as Carcharodontosaurus and Spinosaurus, and would be a riveting addition to the roster. The Chenini Formation was made famous in Operation Genesis due to it being the only site available to access the Spinosaurus and Carcharodontosaurus, but otherwise it is a fairly lackluster site in real life. Nevertheless, the Carcharodontosaurus should be added here for obvious reasons. The Egyptian Bahariya was the site of the first Spinosaurus remains ever discovered, and brought the world's attention to the sailback lizard. Although those specimens were later destroyed in World War II, the site has gone on since to reveal rich theropod and sauropod fossils indicative of North Africa. Carcharodontosaurus is also found here, as it is over much of North Africa. Some referable Dicraeosaurus specimens were found in Egypt, and thus it is a possibility here. A relatively short sauropod, it is famous for being the namesake family of sister sauropods to the Diplodocids, with the Dicraeosaurs featuring short necks with long neural spines, often very dramatic as can be seen in such species as Amargasaurus. Dicraeosaurus was so called because its vertebra extended to a double outward forking, and thus the animal was believed to have adorned some ridge along its back, not dissimilar from the previously discussed Rebbachisaurus. The Titanosaur Paralotitan is by far the largest dinosaur on our list, and indeed possibly all of Africa, but it still falls short of the far more massive South American Titanosaur variants. This supermassive giant lived in a mangrove habitat, the standard swamp environments that were widespread across Cretaceous North Africa, and the excavated fossils were determined to be from a scavenged skeleton which was preserved in tidal flat deposits, hence the name. Due to its size, it would have been well protected from most carnivores besides only the most ambitious of Carcharodontosaurus. In conclusion, an expected site to be introduced due to its connection with the pivotal Spinosaurus, but has since then gone on to provide some more fruitful additions to sauropod knowledge that would be of great asset to the game. The Tagama Beds are part of the all-encompassing El Ras Formation in the Tenere Desert in Niger, Central Africa. This site is the current and only site of which Suchomimus remains are found, and thus is represented in the game here. However, we will also consider the immediate overlying Ekhar Formation, which is of Cenomanian Late Cretaceous, and thus Carcharodontosaurus appears at this locality as well. Furthermore, the Jurassic beds of the Teoraran Formation are close by and will also be considered. One of these considerations is the Afrovenator, a Middle Jurassic carnivore that is similar to the English Eustreptospondylus and Megalosaurus. However, it is of much more gracile build, and thus lighter than its cousins. The existence of Afrovenator indicates the widespread dominance of megalosaurs over Europe and North Africa, where they did not need to compete against the Jurassic Allosaura domination in North America or the Metriacanthosaura domination in Asia. Our next dinosaur is a cult favourite from Operation Genesis, the Ouranosaurus. where the booming calls and magnificent sail on its back rendered it appreciation from the dinosaur community. It was this appreciation that ultimately turned to disappointment when it was revealed the Ouranosaurus was not part of the starting roster, even though the Tagama beds was in the game. Initially believed to be an iguanodontid, its relatively light build combined with basal features has now classified it as a more of an offshoot of the iguanodontid branch, and more of a basal hadrosauriform. However, its striking sail makes it one of the most unique herbivores ever discovered, and a heavily desired addition to the game. Rugops is a semi-important dinosaur in the Jurassic World film canon, due to its DNA being used in the creation of the hybrid Indominus Rex. Although we are unsure what feature was intended to be extracted from Rugops' DNA, but judging by its namesake, probably the wrinkled face to make the Indominus Rex more terrifying to look at. Rugops otherwise is a small abelisaurid with a rather weak skull, with some paleontologists believing it did not partake in active hunting, and probably scavenged for the most part. Understandable, as it was also competing with the apex Carcharodontosaurus at the time, which was much larger than it. In the game, as a relatively bulky small carnivore, it can fulfill a similar niche to what the Ceratosaurus should be, or what it was in Operation Genesis. Rugops nevertheless deserves a strong shout due to its lore connection, and it was quite surprising since every other hybrid DNA of the Indominus Rex gene was introduced, such as Majangosaurus, Giganotosaurus, and Carnotaurus. The Tagama beds and the surrounding locality gives us access to a substantial theropod variety, including a partial film canon dinosaur in Rugops, but also as importantly a classic herbivore from the fan favourite predecessor Operation Genesis. The Tagama beds is also home to some famous ancient crocodilians like the 8-ton Sarcosuchus. The Tendaguru is the most productive digsite in all of Africa, with 110 meters of bedrock thickness spanning a lengthy timescale from the mid-Jurassic to the early Cretaceous. Originating from the colony of German East Africa, early expeditions by the Berlin Natural History Museum unearthed some of the first substantial Jurassic material known outside North America. For the site to only feature just the single Kentrosaurus is almost absurd, as the Tendaguru's productivity in fossil finds is unrivaled anywhere else on the continent. The Tendaguru shows major similarities with the North American Morrison Formation and the Portuguese Lourinhã Formation, and indeed many dinosaurs have several different variants that feature at all three sites. Allosaurus is a possibility here due to the possibility of an Allosaurus tendagurensis species, and it was also at this site in Operation Genesis. However, the remains are now considered indeterminate. Similarly, a Ceratosaurus rochelingi species was found here, and since this dinosaur was also found in the Morrison and Lourinhã, it makes it a striking possibility, but again, its remains are also now considered indeterminate. However, this was the discovery site of the previously mentioned Dicraeosaurus, so an addition here for that dinosaur is necessary. Brachiosaurus was also featured at the Tendaguru in Operation Genesis, but since then the Brachiosaurus branchi species has been deemed distinct enough to warrant it into a new genus called Giraffatitan. Besides being slightly larger, Giraffatitan is otherwise very similar to Brachiosaurus. Indeed, both are considered sister taxons, and generally is not unique enough in my opinion to warrant an inclusion. I'd rather just place the Brachiosaurus here as well, even though it technically is not scientifically accurate anymore. Elaphrosaurus is a peculiar creature, part of the Noasaurs, which are slender, short-limbed theropods with long tails and necks, and the family is considered closely related to the short-armed abelisaurs. Elaphrosaurus, however, also appeared in the Jurassic World holoscape, propelling up its chance of inclusion. One way to describe it is a sort of predatory ornithomimid with a jaw full of teeth instead of a beak, and capable hunting arms. Plus it showcases an extremely unique body plan that we have yet to really see represented in dinosaur media, and no doubt an interesting addition to the game. Ostafricasaurus is shrouded in mystery, known from a single tooth, and that's perhaps why it has attracted keen interest from the dinosaur community in recent years, even being introduced into Jurassic World the game on mobile. From this single tooth, however, it is a definitive Spinosaur, and arising from the late Jurassic, the earliest Spinosaur discovered thus far. From this tooth, it is estimated the length of this primitive Spinosaur to be upwards of 10 meters in length, making it possibly the apex predator of this environment, and a unique theropod to rival the other large Jurassic carnivores such as Allosaurus and Torvosaurus. As an early spinosaur, perhaps it also began to develop the tall spinal vertebrae that were commonplace in the later descendants such as Suchomimus and Baryonyx, and of course the giant sail of Spinosaurus itself. Definitely a very interesting proposition. Likewise, Veterupristisaurus was the first Carcharodontosaurid ever discovered, and alongside Ostafricasaurus reveals that the two origins of these theropod groups came from southern Africa, and the name meaning represents this fact. Veterupristisaurus would have rivaled Ostafricasaurus as the dominant predators of Jurassic Africa, and perhaps this was the beginning of the niche splinter where the Spinosaurs began to specialize into fish-eating traits and techniques, whilst the Carcharodontosaurs grew larger, sturdier and more powerful to tackle the eventual titanosaurs and larger herbivores. From the limited fossils of Veterupristisaurus, it adorned a subtle back ridge similar to Acrocanthosaurus, and shows that many theropods with high spinal vertebrae were widespread throughout Africa for one reason or another. Perhaps a temperature regulation mechanism developed in response to the increasingly dry and humid environment that developed in Africa. Certainly a very rich and interesting site, the Tendaguru features a host of carnivorous variety and allows access to unique dinosaur groups such as the Spinosaurs and Carcharodontosaurs in the Jurassic period. The changes I have also proposed will definitely bolster the usefulness of the site, as it is currently only home to the Kentrosaurus. However, I understand some of these changes are subject to some scientific liberty. We now move to the island of Madagascar with its major dinosaur fossil site at the Maevarano Formation. Geologically, Madagascar has strong ties with the Indian and Australian continents due to being connected with them in the eastern section of Gondwana, and this is evident with the dinosaur variety, with all three continents sharing titanosaur varieties and abelisaur varieties. Where India had the Rajasaurus, Australia the Ozraptor, Madagascar was dominated by the Majungasaurus. We were introduced to the Novosaurs with the Elaphrosaurus. Crossing over, however, the Mozambique channel, we have another in the Masiakasaurus, unique in that its dental arrangement was forward projecting, similar to Rhamphorhynchid pterosaurs, indicating a feeding lifestyle revolving around catching fish and small prey. Rapetosaurus is known from an immaculately preserved juvenile skeleton complete with the skull, marking the most complete titanosaur fossil ever found. Several more skulls were found, allowing in-depth cladistic studies on the clarification of the titanosaur tree, and thus is a very important dinosaur in relation to the study of southern hemisphere sauropods. It was a fairly modest titanosaur, however, being closely related to the saltosaurs, which were also relatively modest in size compared to the other giants in their clade. As such, dominant predators such as Majungasaurus were probably adequate enough to tackle these sauropods. Overall, a quaint site with some interest but mostly forgettable names for the most part. It's one of those sites that would probably be left with just the singular Majungasaurus and not many people would complain. In our final site, we move to South Africa for the renowned Elliott Formation, home to a range of fossils spanning the late Triassic to the early Jurassic. It was also one of the earliest sites in the world that yielded dinosaur fossils, as South Africa was a colony of Britain which was itself experiencing its birth of dinosaur paleontology at the time. It is famed for many prosauropod varieties as well as smaller ornithopods such as Abrictosaurus and Heterodontosaurus, which have chosen to omit because of size constraints. However, an important dinosaur that is better known in North America also appears here, the Coelophysis, a genus that has often been interchanged with Saurolurus in Jurassic Park media, probably due to Saurolurus baueri being named initially during a time of classification confusion during the dinosaur wars. The specimens that are excavated in South Africa are the Rhodesiensis species or Rhodesian specimens, and were initially called Syntarsis before moving to the Megapnosaurus name, before further studies concluded it was a member of the Coelophysis genus. With an abundance of similar sized ornithopods, Coelophysis and other small carnivores of its ilk would have thrived with ample prey. In North America, Coelophysis would have lived alongside Dilophosaurus. In Africa, this niche was vacated by the Dracovenator, an equally unique and interesting cousin of the Dilophosaur clan. It was probably the apex predator in this environment, with estimates of its size pushing 7 meters in length, and like Dilophosaurus and Cenosaurus in their environments, its staple prey was probably the prosauropods. Likewise to Sinusaurus, Dracovinator is another addition that can introduce the accurate Dilophosaurus body plan whilst maintaining the lattice film adaptation, not to mention it also has a sick crest. Although I would personally ignore small herbivores like Lesophosaurus, its clout in recent times has increased heavily due to its inclusion in the pivotal Dinosaur Protection Group poster, indicating its existence in the Jurassic World film timeline. Furthermore, its appearance on the holoscape screen may have confirmed it was present on Isla Nublar during the events of 2015, and as a result it has become one of the most lore-connected species that hasn't made a film or game appearance. Initially believed to be an ornithopod, in recent times it is now considered the most primitive of all ornithischian dinosaurs, and a common ancestor to later major herbivore dinosaur groups such as stegosaurs, ankylosaurs, ornithopods, ceratopsids and pachycephalosaurs. This can be seen by its gaity posture, as it resembles more of a running lizard than an ornithopod, and its inclusion is interesting enough. Nevertheless, it won't bring much new to the table aesthetically, and is pretty forgettable. Massospondylus is one of the most famous prosauropods, as it, along with Plateosaurus, was some of the first specimens to be ever described, and Massospondylus was the first uncovered dinosaur at the Elliott site. A mid-sized prosauropod, Massospondylus featured a large claw on its thumb, possibly used for stripping plant material but also possible for combat or defense. Initially believed to be a quadrupedal, studies in 2007 revealed that its arms were too short to offer enough support and was mostly bipedal. For several decades, Volcanodon was known as the smallest and most primitive member of the sauropods. Although it no longer holds those titles, it is still seen as a transition species between prosauropods and later true sauropods, and thus important to the evolutionary understanding of the group, showing such features as elongating column-like forelimbs to adopt a fully quadrupedal stance, as well as weight-saving features in their bone structures that allowed future sauropods to attain enormous sizes. Important as it is unique, Volcanodon would greatly enhance the small sauropod pool in the game, which so far is currently absent. In conclusion, due to great productivity at the Elliott Formation, it is a site that should be synonymous with an African DLC, as it is much too important to be ignored. Its time frame extends into the Triassic and would greatly improve variety in this mostly underlooked time period. That finishes off our species and dig site analysis for Jurassic World Africa. Certainly a continent that would entertain the carnivore loving fans. I think this is by far the richest theropod variety we've analysed, especially since it is a bit more unique from the constant tyrannosaur varieties in Asia. We now introduce new groups such as spinosaurs and carcharodontosaurs and noasaurs. In saying that, this continent is also home to interesting herbivore varieties as well, including the Operation Genesis classic Oranosaurus. That ends the video for today. Hope you guys enjoyed, and catch you guys later as we embark on a new continental journey. Until next time. I'd like to give a shout out to my Patreon supporters. If you enjoy my content and wish to support me further, check out my Patreon link in the description.